Hey everyone, Austin Schneider here. Welcome to Rise Podcast, where we talk about real influence, self-development, and entrepreneurship. All right, guys, welcome to Rise Podcast. We're super excited because I have one of my great friends here, Stacy Eakman, to share a little bit about his story. So Stacy, he's the president and founder of Eakman Construction. He's also an owner in Contour Fence, a real estate developer and investor, and a great friend of mine with an incredible story that this is going to be a great 45-minute conversation. So firstly, I want to tell a story of how we met. So many moons ago, 4 years, I was selling real estate, and I get this call from Stacy, who I thought was a girl at first. And I was like, okay, who's Stacy, this chick in construction, this girl in construction? And turns out it's Stacy Eakman. He's like, oh, I saw this video that you did for my friend Dan. I want you to come do one for me. And I was like, okay, I'll do it for free. And he's like, no, I'll pay you. And I was like, what do you mean? I just want the content. I want to just film houses for real estate because it's good content on Instagram. He's like, no, let's do something. Let's meet up and talk more about this. So we met, and then we started brainstorming, and then he was one of the few people that called out gifts in me and called out a gift of marketing and social media. And it's really a testament of having good people around you who can identify gifts and help you find your calling, and just mentors and good people in general. So thank you for that. Would definitely not be here if it wasn't for you, and not have many of the stuff that I would have and be as motivated. So
well, I think you would have figured it out. You were on your path. But yeah, that seems like a long time ago. It seems like so long ago.
So crazy.
And how far you've come, and obviously me and business, and looking back 4 years, it seems like so long ago, but it was just yesterday. Yeah. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah. Happy to have met you and be motivated by you. I remember I told people all the time, the thing I liked about you was I could literally call you or text you at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you responded immediately. Maybe not at 9 o'clock at night because you go to bed on time, but 4 o'clock in the morning you're ready to go. So,
yeah, of course.
I always appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, you have a really cool story that I think will inspire a lot of people. I think a good place to start with this, because we live in Bellevue now. You live in Bellevue. You live on Hunts Point. Pretty cool. But you didn't grow up in Bellevue. You didn't grow up in a lot of this city, or even the fast pace. Maybe talk 10, 20 years ago where you were and kind of what your life was looking like.
Well, I grew up in Eastern Washington, small town of Natchez, Washington, just outside of Yakima. Really just kind of a country kid, at home most of the time. We didn't have city nightlife, so on Friday nights in high school, once we got our driver's license, it was cool to just drive up and down Nob Hill Boulevard and just be around people, because there wasn't a lot of people. I graduated high school with I think 87 kids in my class. So and I kind of always had I don't know if it was big city dreams, but bigger dreams than I thought Natchez and Yakima could hold for me. But I thought, it wasn't going to be the construction path, of course. I thought I was going to be a great baseball player, a Major League Baseball player. I was going to be rich and famous and all those things that kids think. My plan was to get out of the small town, but I didn't know where I was going to end up and how I was going to get there. And so once baseball didn't work out, I put my life in baseball, and I just didn't think there was anything else. And so once that didn't work out, I lost my identity. That's who I was. I probably wasn't the nicest person. I was cocky and thought I was really good, and I think karma probably came back and said, hey, you're not that good. I went and played community college baseball in a really small town in Moses Lake, but once I got there, it was all the kids that were really good in their high school, one of the best in their high school, who maybe didn't do school as great and couldn't go to a D1 college because of their grades. They were all on that team, and so then but they were from Tacoma and Bellevue and all over, and so they were from a lot bigger schools, and it was instantly apparent that I was not as good as I had told everybody I was and who I thought I was. And so, you know, at some point there, my identity went with it. And I kind of thought that like my family's identity was tied to me being a professional baseball player because, I mean, I had great parents. They believed in me, and my dad, my dad thought the same thing I did. Like there was nothing else for Stacy. And so, you know, once I lost who I was because I didn't really know who I was just a kid who was good at baseball, or I thought I was good at baseball. And so then I just felt like I had really let everybody down. Cause I mean, since I was 10, I've been telling my mom and dad like, oh, I'm gonna buy you a house. I'm gonna, you know, you wanna, and dad, you know, they didn't want any of that, but he'd say, I wanna live here forever. So, okay, I'm gonna buy this house and let you live in it. And, you know, mom's gonna be driving a Mercedes, and mom's like, I don't want a Mercedes. I want grandkids in a minivan.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, well, okay, well, the nicest minivan you can get, you know, all of these things that I promised. And then when that didn't work out, I had no idea who I was going to be and what and I, you know, in that moment or in that, you know, I don't know, 5-year span, I was pretty sure I was just going to be kind of a nobody, you know.
How old were you when you?
Well, probably 22, 21, 22, until 28. I was just pretty much, you know, I went down a pretty rough path in life, doing drugs, and alcohol, and really heavy into that.
Living not in Yakima.
No, so I've done a couple of stints in Seattle. I moved over here because I was ashamed, and like in Natchez and Yakima, like I knew everybody knew me, and I had told all of them how great I was. And so coming back as a failure, in my eyes, I felt like everybody was gonna look down on me and think I just couldn't face that. So after Moses Lake, I moved to Seattle for a couple of years, and I worked at a car wash. Worked at car washes, and I was really good at that. Right, I ended up being the manager and a big car wash chain, and I was great at that. But you know, that's kind of when the drugs really started, pretty heavy, was when I was over here. And then I moved back to Yakima I ended up losing my job at the car wash, probably because of the drugs. And moved back to Yakima to get my life together and try. And that was in 2006. I moved back there to help Dad. I used it as an excuse to help Dad. My dad was building my sister a house. No, I'll go back for the summer and help Dad build this house, right? And I went and did that, and then stuck around. And really, in my mind, I was there to try to sober up, try to get clean. But that, of course, that didn't work. And so then the drugs, and it got really bad then. And I was living at home, living with my folks. You know, 2006, I was 25 years old, 26 years old, and getting lower and lower and lower, right? Feeling less and less, or more and more like a failure. And like I'd let everybody down, especially myself. And so, you know, the drugs were an outlet for that. It numbed that feeling of being a failure, or I think probably more, it gave me an excuse to be a failure, right? Like, well, if I wasn't smoking dope, and if I wasn't a drug addict, I'd probably be super successful, right? But you know, looking back, that wasn't the conscious thought, but I assume. And things got, you know, pretty rough. I ended up the last few months, I was spending most nights in my truck, or at the dope house, as it's called, and I couldn't face my parents. I'd stole money and tools, and you know, I'd done terrible things.
Manipulated.
Told them.
On the other side of that as
blamed it on them, and you know, I couldn't walk. I remember the last like 6 months when I was living at home, my mom's office, so dad owns a construction company as well, smaller construction company at the time, and mom would do the books for him, and I was working for dad. And her office desk is kind of right by the back door of the house, and we would always go in the back door so we could take our boots off. And I remember my mom is like the most loving and like wants to be involved person, and I like for like 6 months I would walk by her every day sitting at that desk and like didn't say a word to my mother, you know, and I'm living in her house and she's feeding me and you know, at this point paying my truck payment because I'm not making the payments. And, you know, it was tough. I'm sure. I mean, I can't imagine how hard it was for my mom. You know. So then at some point there, after that, and after I'd stolen all I could steal, and I didn't have a whole lot of other options, my uncle, who 20 years off of hard drugs, showed up one night when I did stop by. I would go by and like get clean clothes or grab some food out of the cupboard. And I went there at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm assuming that, well, my dad and mom were listening for me. Mom and dad were listening for me. And when they heard me show up, they called my Uncle Dan, who's kind of been through it. Uncle Dan showed up and parked his car behind my truck and called me downstairs and said, Mom and Dad aren't paying for the truck anymore. You can't work for Dad anymore. That was the other crazy thing, is I was like still working for Dad, but I mean, you know, weighed 140 pounds and just gross. You can't work for Dad anymore. Like, options are up. So tomorrow we can take you to Kirkland, to Lakeside Milam here in Kirkland, and you can go to treatment. I ended up going. It was a long fight night, considered, you know, walking, you know, like all these things, right? But ended up coming, and, you know, that was the start of kind of the recovery. And then, you know, life got way worse after that for a couple of years.
So addiction is like a big deal, right? Like, I've been on the other end of it, the receiving end of someone else being addicted in my family. And I know what kind of hole it can dig, like generationally, and even just in someone's life to death, or to just like ending up just addicted their whole life. What was that? And it's hard to like see it, because when you're addicted, when you're in it, you're just like, that's your world. It's like you're normal. It's like you're new. What kind of was like the turning point where you're like, okay, I just should try to get better? Because when you're in it, you're just like, I don't want to even like think about it.
I mean, I don't remember it specifically, but I do remember that, you know, I went to the treatment facility, and it was just a 30-day deal. And I was similar to my old ways of being cocky and telling everybody that I knew what I was doing, and I just didn't want to be sober, and, you know, I can do drugs and stop when I want. And I was just a jerk. And I remember this one counselor, his name was Chris. I don't remember his last name now, but he was young. He was probably, I don't know, in his early 30s. And he saw that I was in a pretty bad spot. And so they kind of let me stay, even though I wasn't going to the classes, and he would talk to me. I wasn't doing the work when I was there. And it was like time to leave. And you know, he said, what's the plan? How are you gonna stay, you know, cleaned up? And I said, you know, I'll just do it. It's no big deal, you know. And if I want to, I will. If not, you know, I had every intention of just going back and like, okay, I went to treatment to like buy some time and try to get a plan and figure out how I'm gonna weasel my way back in with the family and get a job, so I had money to buy drugs and keep that going. And even in 30 days, I had no intention of doing anything different in my life. I was still a jerk, and I still felt like everything was everybody's fault. And he said something to me when I was leaving. He said, "Oh, I believe you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I'm thinking, "Oh, I got it back. I can already trick people." He said, "But I want you to call me in 2 weeks." He said, "You go prove it, prove it. If you can do it on your own, go do it. And see if you, why not? Just try it to prove it to all of us. You can stay sober for 2 weeks." I said, "Okay, great, deal, bet, And I get to Yakima, Dad picks me up, I get to Yakima, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm super uncomfortable. I feel like they're looking at me like, is he about to blow? Like, what's gonna happen? And I told Mom and Dad I was gonna go to a meeting, an AA meeting. And I think I had every intention of going to that meeting when I left there. And next thing you know, like, I'm not going to the meeting. I'm driving over to see the guy that I would get drugs from, who I owed astronomical amounts of money to, and he probably would have kicked me out, right? And I was driving there, and a girl that was in treatment with me, who we had kind of become friends, she got out just a few days before me. And she called me, like, right as I was almost to pick up the drugs. And so I drove past the driveway just to be on the phone, because again, I don't want to look like a failure. I don't want to, so I was just gonna like trick her into thinking everything was cool too. And oh yeah, everything's going great. I feel great. Yeah. Oh man, my mind is clear. All of the cliches. And I drove down and like parked down the street. And after I got off the phone with her, I just was like, "What?
Yeah.
Like, really? Like, you can't last 2 weeks to prove to everybody you can?" And like, if she wouldn't have called, what would you be doing right now? And and so then in that moment, I called a family friend. His name's Dave, who's longtime sobriety. I've known for a long time, and he lives over here in Seattle. And him and his son, I was really close friends with his son, and he had gotten cleaned up a few years before. They came and saw me in treatment. I like left treatment. That's, we don't have 4 hours, but really close. I called Dave in that moment, and I said, I'm screwed, Dave. I don't know what to do. And he said, "Go to a meeting right now." I said, "I was going to a meeting. Like, that's where I was headed, and now I'm a block away from the dope house."
Crazy.
And he said, "Do you have gas in your truck?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Start driving. I'll call your parents." And so I drove over to his house. And so I think it was probably that moment when I realized, like, the sickness, being dope sick, is an awful feeling. And that not being enough to keep me from going and getting right back into it, I just felt again like a failure. And I was like, it was somewhere in that evening where I just said, okay, I gotta go do something different. And so then I went and stayed with them for a while, and then moved and did nothing different, but stayed sober because they were sober, and my friend was sober, and slept on their couch, and then moved into an Oxford house. And at some point, at some point I had another kind of event, another identity crisis where I was dating a girl who, I thought was great, and she had all her life was together, and mine wasn't, but she still liked me, and so I thought everything was good, but like, her friends were my friends. I didn't have a ton of friends outside of like AA. I would go to AA meetings just to kind of keep her happy. And we broke up, and I remember telling my good friend Chad, he like came over. I was, down, like, what am I gonna do with my life, I remember telling him, like, man, like, she was like my identity, right? Like, she wasn't, right? I mean, of course, she's a great person, but she wasn't like my one, like, I'm married to the right person now. But in that moment, it felt just like when baseball didn't work out, where it was like, that was all I had. My whole life was focused on that, nothing about me, but on, you know, that. And that's when I ended up like getting a sponsor and doing the work and doing the steps,
doing it the right way,
making my amends, and, you know, doing that uncomfortable work.
So people hear this story and they're probably like, how the heck do you like own 2 companies, are a real estate investor, 40 under 40, Puget Sound Business Journal? Like, what was the Eakman's your baby, Eakman Construction, right? Mm-hmm. So you have this messy foundation and somehow transition into what is now, people on the outside see, oh, this man of success who's 40 under 40 and blah, 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 blah. What was the transition from, you know, addiction to being to low of lows to now business owner, entrepreneur, real estate guy?
I mean, it was just looking back at it now. I mean, I started Eakman Construction 8 years ago. So it seems like a really short period of time. But really it was just slow and steady, like just consistency of continually doing better every day, you know, and wanting to grow and wanting to understand being really good at whatever I was doing. I mean, that's always been me, is whatever I'm doing, whether it was the car wash, which is not like a glamorous job, I always knew that like that job, how I act there is going to get me to the next, right? Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I just kept going. And so, you know, the construction company, it started out really slow. I don't think I hired an employee until 2015. Mm-hmm. I worked for other construction companies as like kind of a full-time subcontractor, and I learned a ton from those guys. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew nothing about running a business. Mm-hmm. I knew zero about business. So I just learned and soaked it up and made a ton of mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I had years where lost significant amount of money, and money I didn't have, right? Yeah. It's not like I had any money. You know, I checked into treatment with a roll of quarters, literally. Yeah. Like that was it for the phone. That was it. So I think it was really, I was just consistent and the passion to grow. Yeah. I'm just so growth oriented with. Because you had
a truck. And then you would go out and do like weird, I've heard some of these crazy stories. You'd go out and do weird paving jobs and like gravel and like basement stuff and like the stuff people didn't want to do.
Yeah, all of it. That's all I did was stuff people didn't want to do.
I think the nugget too is that you didn't start Eakman Construction to be this, you know, huge construction company, custom homes, beautiful homes. You started from the very bottom, like the ugliest of the ugliest, and you learned as you went. And I think so many people see businesses or starting in business, are like, I want this huge shiny thing, but they don't want to do it. It's like, okay, I want to do what you do, Stacy, but I don't want to did what you did. You know, it's like you went through the ringer, right? It's like, if we can do that and grow from that, then it's like, naturally it's going to happen. I have to experience that at Brand Teaching. It's like, oh, I want this huge thing, but it's like, no, humble yourself, like take the steps and like do really good early.
And I think, I mean, that's exactly right. And the reason I was able to do that without my ego getting in the way and all of that is, one, I was pretty broken down, and two, like I was doing that literally to eat. Mm-hmm. I had in 2010 I had a son with a woman in Yakima, and there were weekends on my weekend that I couldn't afford the gas to like drive over and pick him up. Mm-hmm. Like in 2013, right? When he's 3 years old, and I've been in business for a year. And so I did those jobs literally to like have food and gas so I could get to the next job. And in those times, I had a pretty good, I had a lot of tools, right? I had all the tools that I needed to do these jobs, like table saws and chop saws and expensive tools. But I was like a revolving door at the pawn shop. Yeah. I would take those tools, pawn those tools, so I had money to survive, and then I would sign up a job and I'd get a little deposit on the job and I'd go get just the tools I needed to complete that job, and then I'd get paid. I mean, it was just a constant, which is, you're just digging a deeper hole because it costs money to get those two, but I was broke. And so I had no other option but to keep going. And then at the time, growth, that was my only option for a long time. Now we've stabilized and, we're profitable, and the things that we're supposed to, for the last 5 years, it's been fine. But there was years where like I had to grow, or I couldn't do what I promised the last people. I just had to keep growing. So if that wasn't the case, I might have given up just like most people would in my situation. But I think that coming from where I came from and getting through the hard things that I got through, and literally knowing what it's like to have nothing, it didn't scare me to have nothing again. Today, like taking risks and doing risky things, of course I'm like more intelligent, and I'm
some attached to it, like some experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a wife that like would be mad if I took too big a risk, right? But I don't go into any of them like with fear of what happens if. It's like, okay, well, this is gonna work, and if it doesn't work, then the next one will, right? And I just keep.
I think of the story of that you tell often, or I hear you tell a couple times about how you got that job. How you started Eakman Construction. You left the card with your girlfriend's dad, and then he calls you, and then you're like, oh crap.
Yeah. So my wife's friend's dad, a girl that I knew was close friends with, and she invited me over. I had just met her. I met her at church.
And this was you in a truck, like
literally with a truck, and my back seat was full of tools. I was living in a basement.
Yeah.
And I had met her at church, and she said, hey, you want to come over to my dad's house for a barbecue? And at this time I had no business license. I literally could not, like the banks would not give me a checking account because of what I had done. I was on what's called a checks list at the time, where you had overdrawn so many bank accounts where they like say, no, not for 5 years, you can't have a bank account. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so I couldn't get any of that stuff. My credit, was non-existent. But I had business cards made that said Eakman Construction on it, my last name. Because I was doing cash work for people. And most of the time, or all of the time except for this one time, I was pretty open and honest about the situation. Like, no, I'm not really in business. It's a cash job. You can write a check, but you got to write it directly to me, not to Eakman Construction, all these things, right? But this one, this girl, I felt, and the house was in like a really prominent neighborhood of Seattle, and they were a pretty prominent family in Seattle, and went over for the barbecue, and her dad was like, hey, I got some work I need done around here. You want to give me a quote? I said, yeah, sure. And at the time it was a humongous job. It was like $60,000 or 30 or $60,000. Yeah. And it was huge for me. It's the biggest job ever. And I didn't think anything of it. One, I didn't think he was going to hire me because like, why would, I'm nobody. And I wasn't lying. I didn't say, hey, yeah, I'm in business, but I also didn't like say, hey, by the way, I'm not really legal. I don't have insurance or a bond or a bank account, right? I would literally take the checks to their bank and cash them. That's how I got paid, I lived on cash. And I sent him the estimate, and weeks went by with no reply, no nothing, forgot all about it. And like on a Tuesday, I got a phone call, and he said, hey, I want you to do that work. We're leaving for Italy for 3 weeks. Do you think you can do it while we're gone? I said, yeah, sure. He says, okay, I'll leave a key under the mat. I'll leave a deposit check on the counter. I said, okay, great. Didn't think anything of it. Amazing, sounds great. I showed up there that Wednesday morning like thinking, man, I hit the big time. This is it. And that check was written to Eakman Construction. And you can't go, I couldn't, just because my last name's Eakman, I couldn't go get it cash. I couldn't do anything with it. So I had multiple problems. One was I can't do the job. Two is I'm gonna have to tell them that now it looks like I was lying, right? Because they understood it differently. And they're gone. to Italy. So I can't even like come clean and be honest right now. That I have to wait for them to get back. And so in that moment, the next 2 days I drove to every bank, and I had no intention of like getting a business license or starting a business. I didn't want to do what my dad did. I didn't want, Dad always stayed small, and that's how I thought construction companies were, was just small, but then I was kind of forced to have to do it, and I found a bank that gave me the best deal ever. Said, "Oh yeah, you found the right guy." The vice president of the whole bank was there. He gave me some guidelines, and if you follow these, we'll continue to give you. And I'm still with that bank. I still use that bank. Got my business license, got all those things, and did that job, and probably lost 10 grand, but now we're here, right?
Yeah.
I for sure didn't make any money on it.
So I think your story is such a good example of, because people think, oh, I want to start a business and it's going to be like this, it's going to just scale, it's going to be really smooth, but there's so many ups and downs, right? And there's like you in a truck, and then you get this job, and then you end up losing 10K, and then it's like you're still going through it. Like I still watch you going through it, even at the level you are with 20xing with where you were at one point. What would you say the biggest piece of advice that you've ever gotten when it comes to business would be, or the best piece of advice?
I think best piece of advice is I mean, that's a tough one. I don't know, actually. I don't look back at what people tell me that much. I think that everybody says the same few things, like, oh, just keep going, and oh, just work hard and get up earlier and don't let anybody outwork you, and all of those cliche things, right? But I think that the best advice I've ever gotten about anything is probably from my dad, and it was from like the time I was a kid, little, is just work hard. He would say it every time I was running out of the dugout out to my position, every time I was on my way up to bat. He would just, every single time he'd say, work hard. And so that always is, for me, is always the fallback of like, okay, when things aren't going good, I can work the problem enough times until I get it right. And then now I just keep going no matter what there's always a fix, and as long as you can keep going and have resources to be able to keep going, or at least the wherewithal and the craftiness to find the resources to keep going, it'll work itself out.
So what drives that for you, like to keep going?
I mean, now it's my family. My son, I love him to death, and he looks up to me. It's not the money, it's the just, I want to make sure he understands that, I got my work ethic from my dad. I don't want to go and have to tell him like, oh yeah, I got lazy and the company went under, right? That would be terrible. I think that probably in a little bit unhealthy way, the fear of feeling like I did when baseball didn't work out, right? The fear of what it would be like to fail all these people again. I do take on the burden of taking care of as many people as I can. And so even though most of those people, mom works for me, right? And I think I'm really proud of that. And so the fear of going to them and saying that didn't work out pushes me pretty hard. The responsibility that I put on myself to do that is, heavy.
Well,
So,
didn't you buy your parents' house?
I did.
And
Yeah.
didn't you think that you were going to buy your parents' house when you were younger?
Yes.
Wasn't that kind of a pretty cool accomplishment?
Yeah, it was really cool. That's great. I mean, I love it, right? I love it that I'm able to help them. They have earned it. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, right, that I'm able to do that. And it was the proudest of moments. I was so excited, you know. So yeah, Dad, I did it so that Dad could retire. But then, you know, Dad's probably a lot like me, and he didn't end up retiring, so it's great or whatever. But he can if he needs to, right?
So we've known each other for what, probably like 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
And I've known you when Eakman has been pretty successful, continue to be successful, and I've just continued to see you just like next level, like 40 under 40, like buy this company, like these projects. What is it from like the point of what from an outsider's view looks like success is, and then from your point of view, what does that look like for you?
You mean like what would make me feel like, okay, this is success? I think if my employees, I think the most exciting thing for me is when my employees buy a house, right, or remodel in their house, and they can afford to do that, and it's not just, oh wow, I pay them enough to do that, but they feel secure enough to do that. Doing that undertaking a huge remodel on your house, you got your house, you feel secure, right? You feel like the company's going to be there and your job is safe. That is extremely motivating, and I feel like when I look at, you know, we don't do holiday parties anymore, winter parties. Last year we didn't because of COVID, but that moment in those holiday parties when I'm looking down the table and everybody's families are there, and there's some of them have 3 kids and 4 kids, and they're all there and they're all happy, and we're all eating together, and knowing that me getting up really early in the morning and going to bed really late at night, and me making relationships and taking risks and doing all those things plays a huge role in their life and how that goes. I mean, that feels really good to me. You know, it's really success. Yeah, and you know, my wife is extremely supportive, and being able to know that she's confident that I've got it is, you know, it makes me feel like, you know, like I'm doing a pretty good job.
So what's next for Stacy Eakman?
I
mean, talk about like, okay, 3 companies, if you want to include the real estate, 40 under 40, Future Sound Business Journal, countless magazines. Like what do you feel is next for your companies, or for your company, or just your life in general?
I think I want to. What's next for me is just to continue to do what I've done. You know, I love what I'm doing. Exactly. I love the business side of it. I think that all of it's going to keep growing. What's next, like big picture, personal, I think I'd love to spend some more time with my wife. We want to have a baby, and we're excited about that. We're on that journey, and that would be a big, you know, personal goal to achieve that, and to you know, help her. That's a huge goal for her as well. So you know, on a personal level, it's that.
I think a little bit.
Maybe. Hope so.
You say a little bit.
Yeah. But I think that, you know, those are personal goals. Business stuff, I'm more of another thing that I think has played into my success a lot is like, I'm just a decision maker. Like I don't think about stuff for a long time. I don't overanalyze it. I just try everything. If it comes to me and I think it's a good idea, and after 10 minutes I still think it's a good idea, let's do it. And then if we try it and it's a failure, okay, I don't cry over spilled milk. I say, okay, we tried that, move on, and that's going to get us to the next thing. So what's next for me is, who knows what comes through the door? You know, where does it come from, and who are the relationships going to be with? You know, I'm open to anything all the time.
Yeah. If you were to work a job and money was an issue, what would it be?
If money wasn't an issue?
Wasn't an issue.
That's a good question.
Come
I would like to be the head groundskeeper at a Major League Baseball field.
Dang. Okay.
And really, actually, not even the head groundskeeper. I'd like to just be the guy that ran the hose that sprayed down the infield. There's nothing more relaxing to me than standing there and wetting down dirt.
With the fence?
No, I don't need to drag the drag. I just want to knock the dust down. That would for sure be it.
We have it.
And if
anyone's hiring,
yeah, and if
Stacy.
if I ever really make it financially,
You'll retire there.
I'll probably just have a big dirt patch
Nice.
out in the backyard and sit
Just
out there in
water.
a lawn chair and drink
Nice.
iced tea and water.
Nice.
I love that.
Well, cool, man. Where can people find you?
Website, company website, eakmanconstruction.com. Contour Fence website is contourfence.com. On Instagram, it's at Eakman_construction. Facebook is just Eakman Construction. And LinkedIn, Stacy Eakman. I think that's it, right?
Love it, man. There's
I
a lot
think
of
we're
places
on
to find you.
TikTok, but that's
Easy ways
I
to
don't know
find
where
you.
we're at. Yeah, you can find me.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. What a cool story. Hope this provided some value to people. I think someone listening will definitely feel motivated by this and inspired. So thank you for your time, man.
Well, no, thank you. I mean, it's an honor to be invited to this. I think it's really cool that my story
We
is
got to get it out
cool
there.
enough to
Yeah.
have Austin Schneider,
Come on.
Brand
Let's
TJ,
go.
put me on his podcast. That's pretty neat.
Come on.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching and listening to the Rise podcast. Please do me a favor and subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. Share it with a friend if you think it was valuable, and also give it a thumbs up. If you want more content, feel free to follow me on Instagram at Austin R. Schneider, where I'll be dropping snippets of this and other type of content. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel and be on the lookout for weekly podcast episodes just like this one. Thanks, everyone.